Well, this morning we have the real privilege and honor of having Secretary David Wilkins from the DCF office in Tallahassee. You know that when I have guest speakers here at Pine Castle, I'm always looking for the very, very best. And this year we were praying and thinking about who would be really, really good to have on Father's Day. And we wanted somebody who is a gifted leader. We wanted someone who was a great dad. And we are honored today to have Secretary David Wilkins and his wife Tanya. We are delighted to have him. Secretary Wilkins is heading up the entire Department of Children and Families out of Tallahassee, a close friend and confidant of Governor Rick Scott, and he is a wonderful friend and a wonderful godly leader. Aren't you glad that we have godly leaders in politics and government? Can I get an amen? And David and his leadership is doing a tremendous job for the thousands of children in our state. And I thought it was appropriate for him to come and minister to you today, all the way from Tallahassee. Would you please give a big Pine Castle welcome to Secretary David Wilkins.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor George. You know, Mark Twain once said, "When I was 14 years old, I couldn't believe how stupid my father was. And in just 7 years, when I became 21, I was amazed at how intelligent he had now become." Right? John Wilmot, the famous philosopher, once said, when he married, or when I married, I had 6 theories of how to raise children. Now I have 6 children and no theories. Right? That's what being a father is all about. I come to you today. Unfortunately, I am your representative to be the father of 18,000 children in this state. Today it's 18,022. At one point in this state, it was over 35,000 children that were in foster care, whose being in foster care means through abuse and neglect that happened in that family, the rights of those parents to be fathers and to be mothers no longer exists, and they become wards of the state. And you ask me, in my statutory responsibility, to take responsibility for those children, to raise those children. So unfortunately, on today, being Father's Day, when we talk about all the important things about being fathers, you know, I'm humbled and distraught with the enormous responsibility that you guys have empowered on me to try to help raise your children. I'm not going to talk a lot about the role of the state or the government today, because that's not the real message I want to give to you. What I really want to talk about is the role of the father. And so today I'm not coming to you as a government bureaucrat or a politician. I'm really just coming to you as a real father. A father of 3 children myself, 3 teenage daughters. I am in the middle of the game right now. That video could have been mine. Absolutely. I come from a loving family, grew up in a small little town in Kentucky. I was blessed to have a mom and a dad, and they raised me in the church, and they raised me with morals and ethics that I still thrive to maintain today. I married a beautiful little girl who only lived about a mile down the street from me, and my wife Tanya. Tanya, unfortunately, came from a broken home, a family of divorce and trials and tribulations. And I've seen the challenges that even today in our 50s, I guess I wasn't supposed to tell your age, but in our 50s, in essence, the scars and the emotional damage that going through a family with dysfunctional issues puts on a person and continues in that person's lives forever and ever. David Blackenhorn is the president of the Institute of American Values. And he wrote, "Becoming a husband and a father is the universal prescription of human societies for the socialization of the male. It is how our society links male aggression, energy, and purpose, all to a pro-social purpose. But unfortunately, the most important predictor of criminal behavior in this country is not race, it's not income, it's not religious affiliation, it's the absence of fathers. If you go and look at fatherhood.org, interesting website, got tons of great stats on that website, it will tell you in today's society, 1 of every 3 children live without their father. If you are African American, 2 out of every 3 children live without their father. I go and I talk to many of my friends and peers who run our Department of Corrections program across the state. One of the statistics I've heard over and over again, 80% of the inmates in our Florida correctional system were fatherless. 80%. You don't have to be a great statistician to start figuring out cause and effect here. Just down the street, you have a large high school called Evans High School here in Orlando, one of the largest high schools in the state of Florida. Over 80% of the children that go to that school are from single-family homes. Over 80% right here in Orlando. You know, the role of the dad has changed a lot over the centuries, right? I mean, when you think back in the beginnings of this country and in the trying times, the father was the provider, the father was the protector of the family. Then as society started changing and rights movements started occurring and entitlements started occurring and the growth of government and in essence outsourcing different types of responsibilities, today the role of the father is so much more confused than it ever was before. And so it's understandable that, you know, fathers are having to adapt to a lot of the same challenges that all of us have to adapt into a continued changing society. But I would argue today that being a father, in the traditional sense of being a father, is truly a lost art form. Fathers do not know how to be fathers anymore. So today I want to talk to you what my belief is the 4 priorities of being a great father. There are 4 priorities that you all know. There are 4 priorities I think you all agree with. But there are 4 priorities that we, for some reason, have forgot to explain to those growing up behind us. The 4 priorities that sometimes we lose the order. It's 4 priorities that we don't like to talk about sometimes in terms of what we want to do. But it's 4 priorities that if I guarantee you that if we just followed, that being a father would no longer be a lost art form. The first priority is obviously simple. It is the priority to our Heavenly Father. Obviously, for the fathers here today, you know, you are here is sending an enormous message. Just showing up. You know, a lot of times they said, you know, half of success is just showing up, right? Just showing up for church on a Sunday morning when it's so easy to sleep in. Pastor George drove 5 hours this morning just to get here. But just showing up shows the importance of being a father and the importance that you place in that role. Galatians 1:10 says, I am now trying to win the approval of human beings, or am I trying to win the approval of God? Am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Romans 3:19 says, now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. If your priority to God, then you are accountable to God. You must be absolutely accountable. And if you're accountable to God and your priority to God, then you must accept the power and responsibility that comes with that accountability and that priority. You must accept the power and the responsibility. There's great biblical quotes. The best biblical quote to reinforce that point is from Spider-Man. In Spider-Man version 2, Spider-Man laid out the facts. He said, with great power comes great responsibility. And fathers have been given godly powers. It's literally laid out in the Bible. Godly powers. Deuteronomy 31:6. I don't have it written down. I got to pull it up. Deuteronomy 6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you, and he will never forsake you." You have such power of being a father. And we've got to recognize what to do with that power and how to channel that power to be a successful dad. And relating to that priority and that power comes priority number 2. And you know what it is. Priority number 2, not priority number 1, priority number 2. But number 2, not number 3, not number 4. It's the priority to your wife. Absolutely. Absolutely. Priority to your wife. No matter what happens. Genesis laid it all out. You remember in Genesis, the Lord created the heavens and the earth, and it was glorious. And he said, my job is done. And for the first time in the history of God's actions to this earth, he reversed his own course. And he goes, it's not done. Because man is lonely and man needs a partner. And so he invented woman, and woman came in. And then he started laying out all these rules about the responsibilities of man and woman in life. And we have completely lost that prioritization. Because if you believe in God and you believe that God is going to control you and God has given you all the powers in the world, then you'll follow the Bible, and where the Bible basically just says the number one responsibility is to take care of your wife. I often joke, the number one responsibility is put your wife in her place. Her wife has to be put in her place, and that place is a pedestal. And she has to be on a pedestal in all things. And people get all those, people take those verses around and they misinterpret them, and they say, the wife is supposed to follow the man and all that kind of stuff. It's easy to follow a man when that man has that wife right up there on the pedestal and praises everything she does. Right? So marriage is number 2. And with marriage, you also just got to realize the choices you have to make every day to keep that marriage together. Businesses go around and they look, when they talk about success of individuals and who they want to have as their leaders, the question often comes up, are you married? Because business people want to understand, what kind of leader am I getting? They used to say, well, marriage implied stability. That's what I remember when I first went into the workforce 30 years ago. Now I think everybody realizes if you can manage a marriage, you could easily manage a business, right? So it's a true definitional success factor. That if you can dedicate your life to a marriage, when statistics show that when you walk down the altar today, the odds are you're going to get divorced. That's what all statistics show, right? And so people go in to marriage today with that premise, that divorce is coming down the pike, and they're thinking about that. I've had many conversations with some very dear friends, and I tell them something that they don't want to hear. When they're going through struggles in their marriage, I said, you realize that if you get divorced, you're damaging your children. And you can't say that publicly anymore. Oh, that's not true. It is a guaranteed fact. You are damaging your children. So you are going to consciously make that decision. Children that you created, that you consciously want to damage them. You'll go fight it. You'll go have a fight at the ball field because the coach won't put your kid in the 3rd inning, right? Right? You'll go scream at your neighbor because he called your little boy a bad word or something like that. But you will literally walk away from your wife and guarantee that you're going to put damage to your child forever, and that's acceptable to you. People can recover from damage. I see it every day in foster care. I live with a wonderful woman who truly has recovered from the divorce in her life. But it's guaranteed pain that's going to happen. And people just don't want to talk about those real facts, and those are real facts. You're going to guarantee to damage your children. So you got to continue to work on that relationship. You got to recognize also, I'm a business guy. Remember, I spent 30 years in a consulting organization managing a large multi-global organization, had a great career in helping companies be more efficient in their operations. One of the truisms that we often talk to about with organizations is every organization is designed to get exactly the outcome that they would achieve. And people don't like to hear that, but every organization is inherently designed to get the outcome that they achieve. And that's exactly what happens in marriage. And when a husband looks at the issues in his marriage, he's got to go back and look. He designed the issues that are happening there, right? He may not know it. It may have taken years to create the bad situations. It may have taken other influences, other people that created situations that caused conflict, but it's all inherently designed because that woman and that man were absolutely in love. They wanted to spend their life together, and over time, they let the system get in their way of addressing that marriage. And so that's why all of us men have to look at what is the system that we have built around our relationships that get in the way of keeping your wife on the pedestal and loving her just as much today as you did 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. That goes to priority number 3. And you better know what priority number 3 is. If you love your God, you love your wife, it's got to be your kids. The Bible and the Lord gave us the opportunity to have children. And with that comes an amazing responsibility. And I talked to you about the statistics of fatherless children today. But having priority of your kids is so important. I think the prioritization and the responsibility of being a father, though, is often dramatically misunderstood. This morning on CNN, they had a commentator this morning who was debating whether a dad was really important in a child's life. Did any of y'all see that? It's rather insulting, I thought. But people are having that conversation. But I tell you, the most important role, I think, in being a dad is simply being the role model of priorities 1 and 2. Everything else is easy. Just be the priorities of role model 1 and 2. The fact they see that every Sunday you get up when everybody else is sleeping in and you get up and you come to church. I mean, you cannot weigh the importance of that. You cannot weigh the importance of that. And then priority number 2, when you are honoring your wife in everything you do. I'm an old Southern guy. I still like to open doors for women. Some women don't like that. I think that's a responsibility. I think it's showing respect for women. And it's just those little things that kids see you doing those kind of things. It drives me crazy when a lot of business guys, and I was in the business world and we all worked long, long hours and we all struggled with marriage and family constantly in our business. Divorce was very high in our business. And I would hear these professional speakers come up and they say, it's quality time. Not quantity, it's quality. And I would always say that is absolute bull. It's not quality time. I mean, anyone can manufacture quality. Unfortunately, you all live in the most manufactured quality place in the country, right? Disney World, and so it's manufactured quality time. And quality time is great, but that's not what makes a family successful. It's not quality time. I think the most important time is with my kids is when we're sitting around doing nothing, and they're forced to talk to us, and that is, sometimes they'll talk to you right there. You send texts to each other. But they're actually forced to have a conversation. Most of y'all remember, we used to have this great concept in homes called a front porch. I don't know if any of y'all have that anymore. But on Sunday afternoons, we would sit on the front porch, and you would rock and you would talk. And that was quality time. That was quality time. And so raising kids is easy. People are making billions of dollars telling you how to raise kids. All you got to do is priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 just falls right in place, right? It falls absolutely right in place. I had a Bible verse. This verse strikes me as one of the most damning verses about raising children that are in the Bible. And I shouldn't say that word. I apologize, Pastor. But 1 Timothy 5:8. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, especially those of their own household, has denied his faith, and is worse than an unbeliever. Can you believe it? So, if you really believed in God, and you really, and you believe that you have to follow his messages and his learnings, then he's sitting there saying, not taking care of your family is worse than not believing in me. And not believing in me is the only way you're going to heaven. This is a real problem. Right? People really ought to pay attention to this point, right? And just think what would happen if people really started focusing on dealing with the kids. First of all, in this state, you spend about $2 billion taking care of those 18,000 kids of mine. You have somewhere between 16 and 20% of the total population in Florida is on food stamps or entitlement programs. A child dies every day from abuse and neglect in this state. Every day, someone dies on average. And we have about 80,000 children that get abused and neglected every year. I mean, this is real abuse. This isn't like, not talking to your kid or discipline. This is real abuse. And so those statistics are absolutely, mind-boggling in terms of what it means to take care of your kids. And when you know the realities of what it takes to take care of your kids, you realize it's not a science, and it's not an enormous time commitment. It's an issue of priorities in your life. Which gets me to the fourth point. Number one, obviously, is your Lord. Number two is your wife. Number three is your kids. Number four is your calling. Your calling, whatever your calling is. To be a great father, you have to demonstrate to your family your calling. In the old days, in those pioneer days, the calling of the man was fairly easy. He was the provider and the protector. He had to go out and kill the game and bring it home for the night. He had to chop the firewood for the fireplace. The role was very defined. Some people say, I wish for those days. But in reality, what our Lord has given us is an opportunity. He has given us an opportunity of unparalleled potential. And that opportunity is for us to live the calling of whatever you want to do. Whether your calling is an occupation, whether your calling is serving others, whether your calling is helping some group of people who need help, even if your calling is just taking care of your family. It's defining that calling and figuring out how to deliver on that calling that makes the most significant difference. Colossians 3, verse 23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Jesus Christ that you are serving. Priorities to your calling. One of the big challenges I see in our DCF program is we have to deal with those who are most in need. And we have tons of programs, and you guys have programs, and we help feed the poor. And Pastor George has actually, I think, the best program in the nation in terms of designing a program to help those who are most underprivileged. And there's all kinds of other models of how we provide different services to people in need. But here's the reality that happens, is people come to our programs and get services, and we do great service delivery in most cases, but they go home. That's the problem, is they go home. And when they go home, they go back to the zip codes that you know about, the streets that you know about, and everyone in that area is at home. At 10 in the morning, they're at home. At 3 in the afternoon, they're at home. Nobody's working. No one's out delivering on their calling. And so we have a whole generation of people who don't understand the concept. So I was talking earlier, one of the key success factors of taking care of your kids is just getting up and going to work. Because they see, my dad gets up and leaves every day. I never really understood what my dad did, but I know at 7:30 in the morning every day he was gone. And he showed back up at 5:30. And he worked in a factory, and I never really understood his job. But I knew that, he got up every day. And that was just a mindset. I always thought that that's what you did, is you get up and you go to work. Kids today don't see that. And so if they don't see that, one is they see a laziness society that I don't have to do this. But more importantly, what they don't see is the potential in themselves. Just because you're poor does not mean you can't be successful. It has nothing to do. Matter of fact, if you look, there's a study that shows the richest people in Florida, the majority of them were poor. You would think the richest people were those that their parents left them money and, they just sort of, continued to grow that money. But that is not true. The richest people in Florida, I forgot the percent, but it's more than 50% are people who had nothing who then created success in their lives. And the reality for our kids in foster care, I talk to these kids all the time. And when you talk to a kid in foster care and you ask them, well, what would you like to do when you grow up? The number one answer, this is like Family Feud, the number one answer on that question, does anybody know what it is? It's to be a social worker. Always. And it's not, social workers are great. I have some social workers here. So social workers is a great career. But it's not that it's the only professional career that they've seen. Right? They've seen a very poised and professional person come in a nice outfit, and they sit down and talk to them, and they're articulate, and they've got purpose in their life, and so they want to be that. But they don't know what a banker is. They don't know what an Indian chief is. They don't know what a policeman is. They've never been around all those other careers, So they just don't know. So once again, it's hard to have a calling if you don't know what your calling could be, right? And for all of us who are Christians, we know there's this magical thing about being called. And I look at it in my kids today, and my kids are teenagers, and they're trying to sort out, well, what do I want to do in my life? And, sometimes we have those conversations about, what are options, and so it's fun to see them struggling with that. And I reflect back in my own life. I was called to be a doctor. I was convinced that was my calling until my first semester in college when I took chemistry class. And the Lord was very clear, and he called and said, you can't even memorize the periodic table of elements. You're not going to make this, right? So, he called me. That was a calling. He showed that I could not be a doctor, right? But I did have a calling, because I always said I wanted to be a businessman. I wanted to wear suits to work. I didn't know what that meant, but growing up in a small town, I never saw that. And thank God my dad, who was a factory worker and did not have a college education, my mom did not have a college education, but they wanted me to live out whatever dream I wanted to live, right? And so they said, if you want to go to college, you can do that, but we don't have any money. Well, there's loans and all this kind of stuff. We'll figure out how to get you to college. You can be anything you want to be, right? But I had a support structure telling me that. So for over 200,000 kids in this state, no one is sitting there telling them, you could be anything you want to be. All of them want to be athletes, which is great, but of course, hardly any of them can ever succeed in that, right? That's a lower, it is a much higher probability to be a bank president than it is an athlete. Just because it's actually almost impossible when you look at the statistics of what it takes to be a successful athlete in today's world. So you can be a bank president at a much higher probability than you can be an athlete. So our kids need a calling. So they need to have exposure to different options. And so one of the issues that all of us as parents is we need to expose them to different things. Two of my kids are actually, wanting to now go into medicine. And all I can do is tell them about how I failed and I could not be into medicine. But I'm exposing them to a lot of different choices so they can think through that option. And so hopefully, they will start seeing that calling. And then hopefully what happens over time is you just keep listening to the Lord and your calling changes. We're on an interesting societal switch right now where our population is aging. And I think what has happened to Tanya and I's life is going to happen to so many other people's lives, which is basically, we had a calling to the business world, and it came out very clear several years ago that no, our calling is sort of like Pastor George's calling. We want to make a difference in our communities. So that's why we then decided, we wanted to start helping people. And we met the governor during his campaign, and he was gracious enough to let us head this agency. My wife is the chief child advocate for the state now. She works for the governor as well as I work for the governor. Makes for interesting pillow talk as she explains to me all the problems, and she says, "Who's responsible for that?" And I go, "I am." And so it makes her some tough nights. But I keep her on that pedestal. But definitely, but we've made our calling in our life now, that our calling is to help others. And we see that every day, and we reaffirm, because the wonderful, most giving thing about helping other people is its instant gratification. Because when you start investing in people's lives, you see those lives changing, and it works because we're just running the same play every time. Here are those priorities. Here are those priorities. And just helping other people understand those priorities. So that's my message. That's my message to you today. Father's Day is a great day. Hallmark has made it a bigger day than it used to be. But I tell you, if you're a father in the audience today, I know you know everything that I just told you. I know that sometimes those priorities get out of whack. Sometimes you don't know if you really can deliver on all the enormous responsibilities that you have. My key message to you is God knows what you can do. And you cannot fail because you are empowered by God to achieve everything you want to do. And if you're a woman and you know a man, or you're beside your man, as who was that? The singer, Tammy Wynette said, "Stand by your man." Whether you're a wife or whether you're a mom, one of your key responsibilities to your men is pray for your man every day. Because God is calling him. God is calling him for a unique responsibility, and he's got magnificent plans. And you want your man to hear that calling, and you want your man to respond to that calling. And so I promise you, as long as you're beside him, he'll be beside you. Father's Day is a great day to recognize the importance of our dads. Our dads are the key to the success of our society. And I really believe that across this country, our dads have lost their way, but now we have an opportunity to regain what we have lost. And I know our Lord's in control. Thank you for letting me talk to you today. I appreciate the opportunity. May God bless each and every one of you. Thanks.